Good afternoon to everyone. Before I start, please allow me to extend my sincere appreciation and deepest gratitude to His Holiness Pope Francis, Monsignor Marcelo Sorondo, Susana Medina, President of the International Association of Women Judges, for the honor and the opportunity to be part of this summit. I am here in my capacity as Regional Director for Asia-Pacific region of the International Association of Women Judges, as an advocate of law and justice, and as a Filipino woman and mother seeking to purge the perils of human trafficking. It's not working. It is almost common knowledge that human trafficking is a global scourge with a significant presence in the Philippines. Based on published reports, the situation has become critical, especially with regards to the age and sex of victims. Last year, the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, which is a local agency mandated to ensure the recovery, rehabilitation, and reintegration of trafficked persons, reported that 93% of trafficking victims in the Philippines are female, and 54% or more than half are minors. In this day and age of technological advancement, it's not working. Which one is it? This one? Okay, I get it now. Okay. In this day and age of technological advancement, human trafficking has grown into a more accessible, viable, and elusive trade. This is especially so in the Philippines, which is not only a third world country that continues to suffer from the blight of poverty, but is also socio-culturally active on various platforms over the World Wide Web. It is estimated that tens of thousands of Filipinos, most of which are female children, are sexually abused over the internet. These victims tend to be younger than those affected by other forms of abuse, and sometimes even include infants. It pains me to say that the Philippines has become one of the most prominent venues for webcam sex tourism. In fact, reports have disclosed that it has turned into a thriving family business where young Filipino girls, boys, and sibling groups are made to strip naked and perform sex acts for live internet broadcast to paying foreigners, mostly Western men. Before the internet, customers had to physically go to a bar or brothel to purchase sex. But now, pedophiles and abusers do not even have to leave their bedrooms to exploit children. It is certainly undeniable that a mother's role is to nurture her children so that they can develop towards their highest potential. But we have thousands of incidents of Filipino mothers who pimp their own daughters, sometimes as young as 3 or 5, and allow them to be filmed while being ravished by foreigners in exchange for money. In the Philippines, we have actual decided cases which appallingly show mothers who oversee the live webcam feed of their young children, mothers who spank their teenage daughters and even hit their heads on the wall to force them to have sex with foreigners, and mothers who manipulate their minor daughters to consent to prostitution with the promise that the mother would reconcile with the girl's father in order to fix their family. In recognition of these incidents, the Philippine Congress has significantly expanded the child-related provisions in its anti-trafficking law to include as trafficking for purposes of exploitation of children, the use, procuring, or offering of a child for prostitution or pornography, for production or trafficking of drugs. Moreover, trafficking now encompasses all illegal activities or work which will harm a child's health, safety, or morals. This includes labor exploitation and recruitment for armed conflict. Where the victim is a child, the following acts are now punishable as attempted trafficking: facilitating travel of a child alone without authority, executing for a consideration an affidavit of consent for adoption, recruiting a woman to bear a child for purposes of selling the child, simulating birth for purposes of selling the child, and acquiring custody of a child for the purpose of selling the child. Now, aside from the anti-trafficking law, there are other statutory enactments such as the Anti-Child Pornography Act and the Anti-Photo and Video Voyeurism Act, under which prospective sex offenders can be prosecuted and accordingly punished. Moreover, under the Cybercrime Prevention Act, the penalties of offenses in other laws are increased when they are committed by, through, and with the use of information and communications technologies. Furthermore, the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001 included Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act as a predicate crime to money laundering. For another, it used to be that the retrieval of digital evidence was problematic because of the lack of requirement or incentive on the part of internet service providers to act on law enforcement requests. However, under our Cybercrime Prevention Act, internet service providers are now required to preserve computer data relating to any form of child pornography being committed with the use of its services or facilities. Under the draft rule on cybercrime warrants, which was prepared under my leadership, the internet service providers now have the corresponding duty to notify the law enforcement authority of any child pornography incidents. Without need of any warrant or court order, the internet service providers, upon request of the law enforcement authority, shall furnish the particulars of the users who gained or attempted to gain access to an internet address which contains any form of child pornography. While expanded legal definitions, stringent penalties, and improved retrieval measures are indeed steps towards the right direction, it still remains that the government should provide a safe platform for reporting that would allow public officials and the general public to expose misconduct and report dishonest or illegal activity and ensure protection of whistleblowers from reprisals. Methods for discovery and an accompanied disclosure are almost as important as having robust legal institutions. According to the Global Slavery Index, The Philippines, as of 2016, has an estimated 401,000 people working in conditions that amount to modern slavery. Meanwhile, according to Internet Agency Council Against Trafficking, the total number of people convicted of trafficking in the Philippines from 2011 to August of 2016 is only 272. Among them, 95% were convicted of sex trafficking. Compared to the prevalence of human trafficking in the country, especially child cyber sex and cyber pornography, the number of convictions is clearly insufficient. It should be equally mentioned that the socio-cultural aspects of sexual exploitation pose unique challenges to combat human trafficking. Filipinos highly value the presence of their families. In fact, regardless of the liberal influence they have gotten from the West, the family remains the basic unit of society. Because of these traditional values, more often than not, rescued children are reluctant to testify against family members. Sometimes they are too young to describe their ordeal or testify in court. Without victim testimony, prosecution must provide compelling police testimony and other evidence, including forensic, digital, documentary, and object evidence, which can be very difficult to obtain. To address this, prosecution teams are preparing to use videotape, in-depth interviews, and or depositions. In addition, plea bargains have worked to speed up conviction. The problem of sexual exploitation is also complex because of its psychological dimensions. Based on certain reports, women and children feel that they are somehow responsible for their exploitation, as they even perceive themselves as naive, stupid, immoral, and dirty. Because of this, many of them return to the sex trade in the midst of rehabilitation or after integration. Taking this into account, the Philippine anti-trafficking law provides that victims of prostitution shall be recognized as such and shall not be fined, prosecuted, or penalized as vagrants and prostitutes. In fact, recent jurisprudence involving two 17-year-olds who admitted to having previously engaged in prostitution and were thus predisposed to having sex with customers for money has established that trafficking in persons is still committed even if the victim gives consent. A minor's consent is never given out of her own free will, even without the use of coercive, abusive, or deceptive means. The solution, however, is hardly local. The transboundary nature of online sexual exploitation clearly impels a coordinated international response. For instance, just this March 2017, Philippines has enforced law enforcement agencies together with the U.S. Homeland Security Investigations and the International Justice Mission conducted a joint operation wherein 8 children with ages ranging from 2 months to 18 years were rescued from their mother and aunt who engaged them in cyber sex trafficking. In another sting operation, a Filipino couple, while preparing their children for a show, were arrested by a team of law enforcement and social workers, and the victims rescued from their parents, who have since been sentenced to 15 years in prison. In another coordinated effort, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, a nonprofit organization authorized by U.S. law to receive reports on online child abuse and sexual exploitation from internet service providers operating in the U.S., have provided Philippine authorities valuable information that became the basis of numerous enforcement operations, resulting in the arrest of offenders and rescue of victims. Statistics from the Philippine Department of Justice Office of Cybercrime show that in 2016 alone, the country received 37,715 NCMEC reports on online child abuse and sexual exploitations. Not only would the Philippines benefit from international coordination when it comes to the conduct of actual operations and intelligence gathering, the integration of international best practices in the Philippines would invaluably enhance the competence of local prosecutors as well as judges in dealing with the technical aspects of cyber prostitution and online sex tourism. In the Philippines, digital forensic experts are still developing techniques on how best to present these findings to the court for trial. While the Department of Justice and Philippine Judicial Academy have intensified their capacity building efforts by conducting regular trainings for cybercrime investigation, this can hardly be solved by solution from within. I believe that it is only through an unrelenting and holistic effort with international partners can the Philippines, as well as the whole world, break free from the bonds of modern slavery. For as long as we continue to fuel this desire to come together, to share valuable input, and to renew our commitment to work together, I am greatly optimistic that the end of human trafficking shall become, sooner rather than later, a fulfilled reality. Thank you.